The tradition of voluntary organizations is deep rooted in our country and has been a part of our national awakening and freedom struggle. Since independence, the tradition has flourished and there has been a growth of voluntary organizations. However, these efforts need to be strengthened and synergized. Voluntary bodies have a role in creating a welfare state. Their continued action is vital necessarily for its survival and growth. The more widespread voluntary activity is, the better it is for the society as a whole, not only because there are more people taking an active part in making democracy work and finding satisfaction action among group activity. Bala, in her study, noted that social work and voluntary organizations go hand in hand. Social work aims at promoting people's welfare. Based on humanitarian philosophy, scientific knowledge and skills to deal with human behavior, it helps individuals, groups and communities to help themselves at the micro level. The profession is dedicated to the pursuit of social justice and the well-being of oppressed and marginalized individuals and communities. It also intervenes at the macro level in the form of suggesting governments to shape people-friendly policies so that development process could be more promoted. Research and the practice of social work focuses on areas such as mental health assessment and diagnosis, human development, socio-legal, psychosocial issues pertaining to diversity, marginalization and oppression, psychotherapy, counseling, social policy, public administration, social program evaluation, child welfare and community development. To fulfill the objectives of social work, social workers are organized into local, national, continental and international organizations. They also work through government and voluntary organizations to address grassroots issues. In this lesson, we will discuss the problems faced by voluntary organizations and its effects on the functioning of voluntary organizations and welfare of the people. Objectives: 1. Understand the problems faced by voluntary organizations. 2. Identify and locate the problems of neighborhood organizations. 3. Understand the research aspects of problems of voluntary organizations. Problems of voluntary organizations. The growth of voluntary action will ultimately determine the fate of democratic traditions in this country. Beveridge, 2018, has rightly stated that the extent to which voluntary action has received acceptance in a particular society is an index of the growth of democracy. Voluntary sector enjoys certain functional advantages, being community based, more accountable and capable of providing services at a lesser cost. More significantly, voluntary organizations have the flexibility to develop innovative projects based on local needs and resources, in contrast to the standardization that normally characterizes governmental actions. Despite the achievements and success of voluntary organizations in various fields and the excellent work done by them in specific areas, the inherent problems would equip them to function more efficiently in formulation and implementation of numerous programs intended for the welfare of the concerned clientele. The following are the problems afflicting voluntary organizations. First one, lack of dedicated leadership. Leadership qualities of the leaders determine the quality and condition of the services rendered by any organization. Mehta notes that in the post-independence era, unfortunately, the voluntary organizations face the crisis of leadership as the leaders who pioneered voluntary action and worked for it with spirit of devotion and dedication choose to enter politics to find berths in legislatures and parliament, thus creating a vacuum for dedicated leadership. With some expectations, the leadership is concentrated in the hands of elderly people. The style of functioning of these elderly people generate problems, exhibits authoritarianism and frustrates younger people who are embodiments of new ideas, initiatives and innovation which are not allowed to be expressed and practiced. Second one, financial sustainability of the sector. Most of the voluntary sector organizations depend on grants or donations to provide services to the disadvantaged people in the society. The three main sources of funding are individual donations, project grants by the government and foreign sources and corporate funding. A look at the size of most of the voluntary sector organizations would reveal that they are small organizations that depend on grants for sustenance. Hence, the lack of financial availability does drive problems for an organization so as to sustain welfare program. 3. Accountability and credibility of voluntary sector. There is a lack of national statute to hold the voluntary sector accountable. Various government legislations that are currently available are all about legal and financial compliances and not about the quality of work of the sector. Foreign Contributions Regulation Act and Income Tax Acts are not implemented in a coordinated way. Different ministries deal with these laws and have different understanding and mechanisms. The compliances are not checked through a single window. At times, the government functionaries are either not aware nor are clear about provisions in the laws. The onus of proving good governance is pushed to the sector rather than government taking the lead. Therefore, there have been attempts by the sector to self-regulate and set up social accountability standards and accredit organizations. Financial Management Services Foundation developed a set of 11 social accountability standards, and Credibility Alliance has also developed minimum and desirable norms for getting accredited. These are recognized by Planning Commission but not by the statute. 4. Professionalization of the voluntary sectors. Increased number of professionals are joining in the sector, which is essential to improve its efficiency and services standards, but it is difficult for the voluntary sector organizations to give adequate monetary compensation to them. Hence, organizations find problem to retain talent. In view of the increased pressure from the donors and government to limit administrative expenses, hiring and retaining high quality human resource is proving to be a major hurdle for the sector. 5. Deterioration in quality of services. The voluntary organizations have to engage themselves in social welfare services in several areas. In this context, they have to work on several programs to meet the requirement of the people. But it has been found that expansion of their activities without adequate preparation, the quality of their services was inevitably to deteriorate and was bound to below the expected standards. Due to this, the problems of scientific approach towards a welfare service found to generate problems for VOs to provide result based outcome. 6. Failure to enlist popular participation. Voluntary organizations are meant to provide opportunities to citizens for democratic participation, but they find problems and difficulties to fulfill this obligation due to which method and manner in which they function, and failed to interact with people in constructive work and develop channels for people's enthusiastic participation. Some of the factors responsible for such state of affairs are general backwardness of the people, absence of an adequate number of dedicated persons, overemphasis on targets and time bound programs, political interfaces and vested interest, easy availability of funds without proper planning, and assessment of felt needs and safeguard for the community, distrust of agencies and workers who do not have base in the community and are unable to win its support, and lack of decentralization which could give a feeling of being partners in development. 7. Isolation of voluntary agencies. Thousands of voluntary organizations functioning at local level throughout the length and breadth of the country, though doing appreciable work, have no links among themselves. It has been observed that technology does impact on networking and dissemination of their services, but it's found that coordination among voluntary agencies is hardly there. Consequently, the spread over in the variety of field area do not seem to meet needs in sizable way and make visible impact to the life of the community. Moreover, the replication of theme, program and approaches are there. Hence, sometimes the welfare work found at surface level rather than impacting to the community for their welfare. 8. Absence of erstwhile pioneering spirit. Voluntary organizations worked as pioneers in early days, but that enthusiasm seemed to have faded these days. They hesitate to undertake new experiments and are content with settling down in certain areas in grooves and are reluctant to move on. In addition to this, it is found that volunteers' approach is more thrilling, a platform for marketing themselves and missing a systematic approach. Hence, all these factors betraying the spirit of vigorous adventurism, which should be the hallmark of voluntary action. 9. Misuse and misappropriation of funds. Voluntary agencies have to be accountable for their finances and activities to the government and the public and should be above suspicion. But it has been seen in many fronts that there have been serious charges of misuse and misappropriation of funds received as grant and aid from the government, foreign donors and raised through their own resources by voluntary organizations. There is no denying fact that some unscrupulous elements have made fortunes by floating voluntary organizations for their personal gains and managing grants from the government. Such problems arise due to no proper mechanism for supervising and monitoring the activities of voluntary organizations. 10. Less development in rural areas. There are problems of voluntary action in rural areas as the ignorance of knowledge for ruralities. Further, it is also seen that the spirit of voluntary action among ruralities is not there. At both the level, the problem of comfort zone exists. The unemployed youth in rural areas have lack of spirit for voluntary actions, and in urban areas there is no spirit to work among ruralities. Therefore, the expansion or existence of work of voluntary organizations are non-existent or on bigger scale the operation of work is not there. 11. Absence of their appreciation in the urban areas. Voluntary organizations have grown more in urban areas than in rural areas, but their potentialities in raising resources and supplementing services to be provided by the municipal authorities have not been properly realized and appreciated. In urban areas, the voluntary associations of philanthropic interest protecting trade union and miscellaneous type exist in large numbers, such as societies for promotion of various kind of education, recreational and cultural activities, professional association of doctors, lawyers, teachers and elderly association, welfare associations, etc. The services of these voluntary associations can be best utilized by the municipal government in raising quality of lives of citizens. 12. Inadequacy of trained personnel. Once, the voluntary organizations were served by unpaid social workers, imbued with the spirit of service and did not require any special education or training. But the present trends of professionals in social service emphasize the proper education and training of personnel in context of scientific education and technological advancements, impinging upon quality of services to be provided for various types of clientele. The functional problems of voluntary organization lie due to untrained staffs and inadequate facilities for training of manpower. It is needed that training facilities for personnel employed in voluntary organizations, therefore, need to be made available at grassroots level and to cater to the requirements of all types of workers at all levels of hierarchy. 13. Lack of voluntarism or social work among youth. The basic characteristic of voluntary organizations is voluntarism. In early days, youth were making their career in voluntarism, but that enthusiasm seemed to have faded these days. The extent of voluntarism is declining day by day and turning into professionalization. Even the young graduates from social work are interested in making their career professionalism. This leads to lack of efficient volunteers in voluntary organizations. 14. Social audit and accountability. Many organizations do not opt for social audit, hence the success and quality of the program could not be ascertained from beneficiaries' viewpoint or perspectives. Social audit and accountability have to be institutionalized in voluntary sector along with the growth of professionalism. In voluntary organization, social audit found to be missing or apathy towards it. 15. Absence of common forum and coordination. Multitude of voluntary organizations exist at local, state and national level, have been provided with no forum of discussion and to sort out their common problems of overlapping, duplication, coordination, as also to facilitate exchange of information, data collection, research, training and publication, and to place before the government their common difficulties. The absence of such common forum also incapacitates voluntary organizations to offer united stand against the government when it humiliates them by instituting uncalled for investigations against them motivated by extraneous considerations at the behest of politicians and egoistic government officers. The problem of lack of coordination and common forum does not allow voluntary organizations to reach at global level too. 16. Setback for their autonomy. Voluntary organizations are working at an autonomous level, hence autonomy is at first casualty when they approach government or semi-government for welfare program. It has seen that by adopting government program or taking grant from them restricts work and follows bureaucracy, cuts their freedom to work upon the program or scheme. Moreover, if they have to execute scheme and programs sponsored by government, even if they do not conform to their policies, methods and techniques of implementation, which may cause areas of conflict between them and government. Consequently, the harmonious relationship and cooperation to serve the best interest of the society is at stake sometimes. Other problems. Most of the departments, ministries have not played a proactive role in establishing partnership with committed VOs and have generally confined their attention to only those who apply for funds to their offices. They have on their own not requested good VOs to come to their fold and begin a relationship. Departments or ministries have a uniform appraisal procedure inhibiting sensitive or well established voluntary organizations for those engaged in social activism from approaching the government departments. Next, there is no uniformity among methodologies of monitoring and evaluation in voluntary organizations. There is need to improve methodologies for monitoring and evaluation of the work undertaken by the voluntary sectors. There is a contradiction between the development and mobilizing role of voluntary agencies. The latter style of activity is by definition more participatory, while it is hard to devise economic programs in which contributions and benefits will remain approximately equal. In the Indian context, the developmental role fits in with the consensus model, while the mobilizing role paves the way for conflict model. Reviews evidently supported that voluntary sectors have remained unattended to in India. Therefore, the important contribution in terms of innovation empowerment and research and advocacy has found lacking or missing in function of voluntary organizations. Large and skilled manpower available in the country, such as the retired persons who could be put to such social welfare activities, but there are problems of voluntary organizations that such skilled manpower is not being asked for expertise. Hence, the dearth of knowledge partner found to be missing. In nutshell, the voluntary organizations have played magnificent role in rendering services to different sections of the society and thus carry bright prospects to continue with their present programs and extend them to the areas where they do not exist with support of government, of which they are partners and not contenders in the service of the people. The concept of voluntarism is implicit in the constitution and it is necessary to evolve a mechanism to broaden and deepen its presence in all parts of the country. Lastly, voluntary organizations have the flexibility to develop innovative projects based on local needs and resources, in contrast to the standardization that normally characterizes government actions. Notably, donor agencies, including the government, take corrective measures for proper growth of voluntary sector, regions and functions where it is most needed. Let's summarize today's class. Social work and voluntary organizations go hand in hand. Social work aims at promoting people's welfare. Based on humanitarian philosophy, scientific knowledge and skills to deal with human behavior, it helps individuals, groups and communities to help themselves at the micro level. The profession is dedicated to the pursuit of social justice and the well-being of oppressed and marginalized individuals and communities. It also intervenes at macro level in the form of suggesting government to shape people-friendly policies so that development process could be promoted.